again, 4 minutes.
Hello everyone, welcome. We're going to get started here. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Hopefully you guys can see me. I'm blinded up here in the spotlight. So my name's Troy Madsen, if we haven't met. I don't have a sticker on, but hope you guys can remember that. I'm one of the organizers of the Arizona Psychedelic Society, so welcome to Meraki. Welcome to our Monday night series. We're going to have a more of a kind of conversational podcast style interview sort of thing tonight. We're going to talk about Gary's journey with some particular psychedelic medicine and sort of how he got into it, and more so what the journey's kind of looked like over the last year or two, and sort of where he's come to it now. And we'll invite some audience participation in. Hopefully some of it will be valuable to you guys, and we want to get some of your feedback and your thoughts on it too, because as we know, this is all a very personal sort of thing. There's not any one right way or anything like that. So yeah, maybe to begin we can just kind of all sync up together. So I'll encourage you guys, if you want, just to kind of settle into your space. Put your feet flat on the ground, kind of feel the seat underneath you. You're welcome to close your eyes if you want to. I'll just take a couple of deep breaths together, just kind of centering in and sync up. So just invite everyone to take a nice, long, slow inhale in through the nose. Hold that breath at the top for a little bit, and then relax and let the breath come out the mouth. And one more time, nice deep breath in. And let that go. And last one, nice big deep inhale. Whatever else is bouncing around up there, just let it all go with the breath. Nice big sigh. Okay, welcome back. So we'll begin. I'll let Gary or Andy, whichever one wants to go by tonight, just kind of introduce himself a little bit, kind of let people know sort of why you're up here, and then we'll dive into your journey a little bit and stuff too with ketamine. So go ahead.
Thanks. So, my driver's license says my name is Gary. I do go by Andy these days, though, so I will answer to either. That's fine. So let me talk a little bit about, I guess I should probably start with how I started with all this in the first place. The person that you're looking at here is very different than the person that I was when this whole thing started a couple of years ago.
And I'll jump in there and attest to that, because it's hard to tell from a first person point of view, but I've had the privilege of knowing Gary and now Andy for a couple of years now, probably about 2 years. And he asked me today as we were walking in here, he said, if you could have fast forwarded and seen me as he looks and stands and walks and talks and carries himself in the world as he is today, to what he was a few years back, would you believe it? And I was like, I don't think so. I really wouldn't have guessed it. It's been quite a transformation, as I think a lot of us have experienced, right? With life and plant medicines and psychedelics and all of that. So just want to put a little exclamation point on that part, that there's definitely been some very real and obvious changes, both externally and internally. So yeah, please continue.
Yeah, I look at pictures of myself from 3 years ago and I chuckle because I can't believe I was that guy. But let me give you a little bit of background as far as how I came into psychedelics in the first place. And I'm not going to belabor my story because everybody has one, and but I was raised in a really difficult family. I come from an incest family, so all the stuff that goes along with that helped to inform my life. We also moved a lot, so by the time I graduated high school, I had been to 13 schools. So I was the new kid in school, bullied all the time, and I was not safe at home. So there was no safe place for me in the world. And I just withdrew. And I can honestly tell you that if I had about 45 minutes, I could probably recount every memory I have of my childhood from birth to high school in about 45 minutes, because that's all I remember. So I was dissociated, checked out most of the time, and you know, probably a lot of you know the rest of the story. With that kind of start, I've been married 4 times, alcoholic for 30 years, major depression, first suicide attempt, I was 14 years old. I mean, what the hell kind of 14-year-old kid tries to kill themselves? That was my life. Last suicide attempt, I was 62. That was about 3 years ago. And just spent my entire life trying to prove that I was worthy, that I was okay. It's been a really challenging life. I was 3 years ago, I was very straight-laced. I looked nothing like this. And to be honest with you, I would have sat in total judgment of everybody in this room, because you guys were a bunch of kooks. All of this psychedelic stuff and crystals and energy and blah, 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 that was for people that aren't smart enough to know how the world really, really works.
In fact, I want to jump in there and add a little color to that story, because that was when Gary, at that time definitely going by Gary, crossed my threshold at my door. A lot of you have been to my home and sat down at my table there, and we were talking about different psychedelic medicines. And this was when you were very new to it. I mean, probably couldn't really even spell the word kind of thing. And very adamant that he did not need any of that woo mystical shit, or however you pronounce it. He's like, nope, I'm just here for the, this is this and that is that, and carry forward. And I was like, okay, I hear you.
That is very true.
Are you trying to tell us you see a little bit of gray now? It's not all black and white?
Yeah, a few things have changed. So, after my last suicide attempt, which was really dramatic because I called the VA crisis hotline, and when they found out I had a gun, they called the Mesa PD, and they sent the SWAT team to my house.
You swatted yourself?
At 9:30 at night in a 55-plus trailer park. So that was a big wake-up call. And I just decided I was done. I really didn't want to die, but I just didn't want to live like that anymore. I've been diagnosed with depression, treatment-resistant depression, anhedonia, which is the inability to experience pleasure, alcohol use disorder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've been on every antidepressant known to man. I've been in and out of therapy for decades. And I was just miserable. I mean, I stayed in my house all the time. My curtains always drawn. I would hear somebody outside and my heart would start pounding because there was a person nearby. It was just not a good way to live. And I got to the point where I decided, I'm done. I don't want to die, but I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to try something different. And I had heard about psychedelic assisted therapy, and so I started. I had just retired. I retired at 62, and I got on YouTube and I just started watching videos about psychedelics and this and that. But they were illegal, and and only hippies and druggies do that stuff, and I'm not going to do that. And I found out about ketamine, which is legal, and I thought, well, that's my ticket. That's my answer right there. So I did a boatload of research. I mean, I researched for probably a month, full time, and I'm an academic, so I used to be a college professor. So I did a lot of research, and I said, this all really makes sense to me. So I went to my psychiatrist at the VA. I got him to okey doke ketamine infusions at a clinic. So the initial protocol was 3 or 6 doses over a 2-week period, and then you go back for boosters, usually every 2 weeks for 4 or 5 times, and then it's kind of PRN after that. And what I found is after that first couple of doses, dude, total life changer, almost immediately. I mean, one of the things about ketamine, and every single study says the same thing, is ketamine abates suicidal ideation immediately, first time, every time, pretty much universally. That's every study is very consistent about that. And I found that to be true. And I found that within, by my third, fourth dose, I would come home and I'd look, why is this so freaking dark in my house? It's like a cave in here. And I started opening the curtains and letting some light in, and things were just organically starting to change for me. And it was awesome. I mean, it was a whole new way to look at life. But the problem was that when the clinic wanted to start cutting my doses from every 2 weeks, I found it really wasn't very durable for me. And in between the second and third week, by the time the third week hit, I was right back where I started. Every single time. I had to go back and dose every 2 weeks for this to remain. And I understand now why. One of the things about ketamine that is very interesting is ketamine is not actually a psychedelic. It's not a classic psychedelic. It's a dissociative anesthetic. And I don't want to go into a whole blurb about all the details of how it works, but in essence, and this is important to my story. Basically, what people talk about ketamine a lot in terms of rewiring your brain. You hear that expression a lot. This is to kind of rewire your brain. Ketamine really doesn't rewire your brain, it unwires your brain. So in that dissociative state, the default mode network, which is the place where your brain goes when it doesn't have anything else to do, that's the thing that, when people laugh, you think they're laughing at you because that's the paradigm you live by. Those types of those default places to go, it literally just obliterates that. So there is no pre-connections for anything anymore. You become basically a very blank slate, and that status is called neuroplasticity. So your brain is very plastic, so parts of your brain are talking to other parts of your brain that normally don't do. The normal way that I would handle anger or being somebody offending me or whatever, the normal go-to place kind of goes away for a little while, and you have to kind of figure out how to deal with this fresh and new now. The problem for me and I know this now in retrospect, the reason why it wasn't durable past 2 weeks for me was because I was emptying emptying my bucket is you've heard me talk about that expression. I was emptying my bucket. Excuse me. I was getting all this angst and I was getting all that out, but I was a clean slate, but I wasn't putting anything new in, and that was the problem. And I was just living my life like I always lived my life, so I was rebuilding those same connections because I wasn't focused on doing something different. And so, it took me, because I was a screwed up dude, so it only took me 2 weeks to just fill my bucket with a bunch of crap all over again, and I would be right back feeling the same way that I was, and I would have to go in for another infusion, and then I get a clean bucket, and life is really good for 2 weeks. And I literally started living on a 2-week schedule. And having recently retired, I was planning to go out on the road and be a nomad. I was going to get a motorhome and just go live the free life and do my thing. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do when I'm living out in the desert and I can't go to a clinic every 2 weeks? And so that's when I found Troy, and I started looking for a reliable, safe source to start dosing at home. I had to switch from the IV to intranasal because that was what I could get. And so I, studied bioavailability and the correct dosing and just all that kind of stuff. So I really approached this really well. And so I started dosing at home instead. And At one point, I made a decision to drink from the fire hose. A cautionary tale, do not drink from the fire hose. But I did.
Amen.
And this was between Christmas and New Year's last year. And I decided, I'm just going to take this thing for a ride, and I'm going to see what this can do, because I don't want better durability. I want permanence. I want to live like this all the time. I don't want to go back anymore. And between Christmas and New Year's, in a 2-week period, 14 days, I dosed 12 times in 14 days. And I did nothing except that. All day long, I would watch YouTube. I started by watching all stuff about psychedelics, and I found all the channels, and I started getting more information, and then I started hearing about non-duality and ego disillusionment and this and that. And so then I of course, YouTube is great, because as soon as you watch something, it's going to serve you up more of that stuff. And so I just started watching more and more and learning more and more. And everything that I learned all day long, I would dose at night and all that stuff. I had this totally open mind, and all that stuff just came in. And really, I was really able to integrate that stuff. And I got up the next day and I did it again. And I would start with a new thing. And my goal was not to have this happen to me. My goal was not to have a spiritual awakening. My goal was to not be screwed up and depressed anymore, and just live a normal, happy life. That's really all I wanted. And what I decided I needed to do at that point was, I decided I just needed to let go of everything. And that was my goal in that 2-week period. I'm just going to let go of everything. Everything I believe about myself, about the world around me, about other people, about my parents, about God, about everything. I want to believe nothing. I want to start from scratch. To borrow a religious term from Christianity, I wanted to get sort of born again. I wanted to just start over from scratch at 63 years old. That's what I wanted. I just wanted to start from scratch. I wanted to just let go of all my preconceptions, all my biases, all my prejudices, all the stories, and drinking out of the fire hose put me there. In retrospect, I probably should have stopped after about the 8th time, and I didn't. I kept going, and I had what is commonly referred to as a spontaneous spiritual / Kundalini awakening. And it was like, what happened to me? The first experience that I had was maybe a couple of days after that last dose, and I went to make lunch, and I put out all this food on the counter. I was going to make this great lunch, and then I looked at it and I said, oh my gosh, I'm like one with this food, and this food came from the universe, and it just feels wrong to take more than what I need. And so I put it all back, and I made like half a sandwich, and then after that was done, I said, fuck, what happened to me? I broke my brain. Who thinks like this?
Anyone else had any experiences like that? No, I wanna kind of double click on some of that, because I think that's a good overview. But I think there's maybe some potentially interesting things in there. As I've gotten to see Gary's journey and his experience sort of interrupted throughout time. Not every day, but probably once a month or every other month or something. We'd kind of get together and connect, and I would see where he was at and see some of these changes that you're talking about. And I think a lot of us have probably gone through our own version of that journey, or maybe are in the middle of it right now, if it's ever even ending. But some of those more heavier transition periods where we're letting old parts of ourselves go and stepping into this new self. And certainly you did that in, I think, a fairly condensed period compared to most, which I think felt right for you, right? Everyone's got their own path and their own pace, and some people need to and want to take it really slow, and that works really well. I'll probably raise my hand more on that end of the spectrum, and other people don't. That doesn't work, right? So there's no, as we've said, there's no one right path. But I think in that there was some interesting parts of that journey where you'd maybe felt like you'd hit a next level, or were at somewhere that was spiritually heightened or better in some way or something, and then as you try that suit on and get to take some steps and can look back and look in the mirror a little bit, perhaps that opinion changed over time. I'm wondering if you could maybe, if there's anything that comes to mind with that, highlight any of that, just because I think the reason why I bring that up is that I know I've experienced this. I don't know if anyone else has. We can make this interactive if people want to, share something short or something too. But I think that's a challenge as we seek to grow, especially in this more spiritual, personal realm where there is a lot of freedom, I think, in how we choose to express these things and how we incorporate them and how we show up. There isn't really a right way. We don't have an air quotes Bible to follow, right? There's not a strict set of guidelines or rules, although you can find them out there. I don't think there's any generally agreed upon thing, and so it often, I think, falls on us to decide what is right for us, what is healthy for us, and sometimes I think that can be a challenge. I think for you that was a challenge to feel like, hey, this feels maybe more right or better than what I was doing, but is it ultimately where I want to land, right? And I think you probably had some points where like, yep, this is, and then it's like, well, maybe not. Maybe there is more there. Maybe ego did kind of creep in a little bit more than I thought it was, than I thought I, kind of defeated that demon, if you will, or whatever. And, maybe if there's anything that comes to mind around that.
Sure. I think the biggest issue for me initially was just confusion, because I didn't understand any of this. Like I said, I was not into any of this woo-woo stuff, and all this non-duality and blah, 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 all that stuff. Nah, I was not about any of that at all. And all of a sudden I was experiencing it. And I experienced it not only emotionally, but I experienced it physically. Within the first 5 months from starting from that I call it my awakening, I lost 80 pounds. I got off all of my medication. I was on medication for diabetes, high blood pressure, and acid reflux. All gone within 5 months. Wasn't taking any medicine. I lost 80 pounds. It literally changed my body.
Grew a Santa beard, all kinds of things.
I grew a Santa beard, and I wear hippie pants with patches and mushrooms on them now, and mala. I did wear my fancy mala to this today. I dressed up. But yeah, everything really changed, and I didn't know what happened. And I think, a good point of emphasis is really the importance of having support. I did this myself for the most part. I did this by myself. And I was like, I don't understand any of this. What is this? What has happened to me? And I knew that the Buddhists do this non-dual thing. So I went to a meditation center and found me a Buddhist monk. And I spent a couple days talking to a Buddhist monk. And then I read the Tao Te Ching and I understood it. And I said, oh my God, I must be a Taoist now. And then it was the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I was just in this place of real openness. And I did not understand what was happening. And it was very chaotic. It was not a blissful time. I was having all these really profound mystical experiences during this time, even without dosing, without the ketamine. It was very, very chaotic, and it is that. And I'm just going to say, everybody's got their path. I don't recommend mine. I don't recommend drinking from the fire hose and just diving into the deep end of the pool. Oh, forget it. Let's just dive in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is kind of what I did. Things are different now.
Can I ask you
go
a
ahead.
question real quick? I just wanted to take you back. So when you initially started with the ketamine at the VA in the clinic, so that was an IV I'm just curious, what protocol were they following? Did they do any integration with you? Did they
None.
help you? That's why, I mean, because I've heard that story from a lot of people. That, yeah, ketamine can be helpful and stop the ideation of suicidality and all that stuff, but without the integration around it and actually knowing what to do, like you said, you had to do it on your own.
Yeah.
That's not how it's supposed
That
to be.
is such a great question about did I get any integration at all? No. You have to have a driver, to take you home. I got dropped off. They hooked me up. 1 hour later, they helped me out to the car and sent me home.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
So that was not the way this is supposed to work. And so they were helping me empty my bucket without telling me how to keep it empty. They weren't teaching me new neural pathways, new ways of looking at things. And I do work with, and I'll talk about that later, but I do work with other people with ketamine now, and I have a very specific process that I follow, and I'll talk a little bit about that and why I think that is such a valuable approach. It's a little bit of a different kind of approach, but I think that was the hardest thing for me, was that I didn't have guidance, I didn't have the integration, all I had was intent. And the intent is really, really important, but like I said, I didn't have any support, any guidance at the time, and that was really challenging. So basically what ended up happening is I ended up selling my house, and of course I'm in a new paradigm now. I sold my house, I gave away most of my stuff. Instead of doing all the fun stuff, I was going to do motorhoming. I went and lived in a little town called Pierce, Arizona, halfway between Douglas and Wilcox, in the middle of freaking nowhere, in May, in Arizona, in the summer. I had never even been camping before, because why would people want to camp and live in the dirt and in a tent when you can live in a house with a hot tub? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I went and I lived off-grid in a place where there was no power, no water, no nothing, for the first 5 or 6 months. And I just, it was like going to Tibet or India, to go find enlightenment or something. That's kind of what I did. I was in my little cave out there in my motorhome in the middle of the desert, learning to be with the earth, learning to understand the earth, and learning what all this was that was happening in my life, all these changes that were happening. And I spent all day studying and whatnot. Up until recently, I probably averaged 3 to 4 hours a day of meditation. And that's not because, I meditate 4 hours a day because I'm so spiritual. That's because I meditate 4 hours a day because I have to, because I had to, because there was so much that was coming in and so much change in my life that I needed that focused time to really integrate that everything every day, or I was going to just burn out. So this has been a very different kind of path and focus for me.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's, because I got to see, interspersed between this desert living that he was doing, every once in a while he'd come out into the city and meet me for a coffee or something, and give me a little update, and it was beautiful for me to see the growth. It was very obvious, especially see it, spread across time and whatever. But I'm curious if there was any, because you'd come to me and you'd share these new revelations, right? Hey, I learned this, I read this, I've got this is anchored in me. Here's how I'm going to move forward, and then I'd see you again a month or two later, and it'd be different, right? It'd change, it'd grown, developed, evolved a little bit, and I wonder if you can think back to those, like in the moment, that it seemed to me like when you were telling me, it felt very real, felt very tangible for you, and then fast forward a month, 2-3 months, whatever, and you look back and go, oh, that's no longer as real and tangible as it was. So yeah, I'm just curious to tease that apart more, like how it felt in the moment. Like was there any information, feedback, signs, anything that was just a train stop along this journey, or was it like, no, it felt kind of like permanent, and then only in retrospect I was able to see the shift?
That's a great question, and I'll answer it like this. I finally arrived like 100 times. That's the way. You want to know how it feels? That's how it feels. When this first happened, you know, and this is a phenomenon that I've learned from other teachers since then, especially for men, you know, is this Christ complex. I must be the second coming of Christ or a reincarnation of the Buddha, because no one in the world could possibly see what I see and experience what I experience. No, this is not even possible. Nobody could possibly have experienced this stuff. That didn't last very long. But yeah, every time I learned something new, every time I started exploring, you know, and that's the interesting thing, and I learned how to work with ketamine, and I continue to use it. So even after the fire hose, I averaged about once a week. So that was kind of my routine in Pierce. Was on Fridays I would dose, and I would take everything I learned from the week, and I would leverage that plasticity, that neuroplasticity, that super openness. Because, dude, I can go down 100 rabbit holes in about 45 minutes with ketamine. That would take me months to do otherwise. And I can explore every one of those rabbit holes to its fullest. And I can even integrate what I learned from that. And that was my pattern. I have subsequently learned about bypassing. For those of you familiar with that term, I did a hell of a lot of bypassing, and here's the way I describe it. Let's say that you grew up in New York City, and you've never been out of New York City, but you want to see the country, and you want to go to Los Angeles. Well, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can get on an airplane, and you can fly to Los Angeles, and you can be in Los Angeles in a matter of hours. Or you can take a train, and you can experience the sights, the smells, the food, the people, the culture, all across the country on your trip to Los Angeles, and still end up in Los Angeles. For me, I made some mistakes along the way, and one of those was using ketamine because I could to take a plane. And I missed all the visceral human life experiences to get there. I still got to the same destination. I still understand the truth. I still acquired the wisdom and knowledge. But I took a shortcut to get there, and I didn't have to go through the pain of working through a lot of shadow stuff in real time with other human beings, eyeball to eyeball, face to face. I got there on an airplane, and I just bypassed it all, and that's my description of bypassing, is you know, taking that jump over everything. And so that was certainly one of the mistakes that I made along the way, and I have kind of corrected that. What the end of the story kind of is yes, I've had all these epiphanies, and I've arrived, and now this and that, and I started finding other people who were awake already and who were in this process far beyond me. And they would say, there's more to come. There'll be other shifts. And I was like, no, you just don't understand, because you just don't get it. And sure enough, yes, there are. And yes, there were. And I have, the place that I'm in now, sort of the end of the story, is I really have kind of come full circle. I don't have a lot of mystical experiences anymore. I can. I've developed some gifts that I don't need psychedelics or ketamine for. I do a lot of energy work of various types, and I do work with some other folks with ketamine and without it. But my life now is just very centered. I'm just a dude walking down the street like everybody else, living in this world. And I really struggled with that, because living like a monk for 6 months after this profound psychedelic experience and this whole transition and this awakening. When I ended up, so Quartzsite is like the Mecca for nomads. There's like 1 million of us that go there during the wintertime, and that's where I was headed. And I was freaking out, and it was like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to be around people and live in like a human being when I don't feel like one anymore? I mean, I do channeling and astral projection and all of the stuff. You know, you name it, been there, done that. Was it real? Oh, abso-freaking-lutely. Is that the focus of my life? No. And I missed the experiences. I still miss those experiences. You know, having those just profound, mystical, just, you know, to be able to see the space in between everything. I got to do that once. Holy crap. That's something. But that's not what my life has come to be. That's not what my life is. And now I am in the nomad community. I have a Facebook group called Awake at the Wheel, Daily Meditations for Nomads. And I have become a person of love and grace and gratitude. And for the hundreds of AA meetings I've been to, the worst meetings ever were the gratitude meetings. And I still chuckle at this because sometimes in AA they'll have a gratitude meeting and you can just feel the air get sucked out of the room when they say it's going to be a gratitude meeting today. Because people want to come there and talk about how shitty stuff is and all their stuff. They don't want to talk about gratitude, and including me. And it was like, oh man, I hope they don't call on me because I got to think of something really good I can be grateful for. And it's so funny because I live in gratitude. And I know it sounds wooey, but every single day, there isn't a day goes by that I don't just turn my face and the sun just catches my face in the right way and tears come out of my face because I am so freaking grateful that I get to live like this. And I say that every time. I don't freaking believe I get to live like this. I can't believe I get to live like this. And you know what? As I have changed, I've never hung out a shingle, oh, I'm a healer and I can help people, or I'm a light worker, or any of that kind of stuff. But you know what? People see the change in me. They see the love in me. They know that when I see them, I see them. I don't look through them. I don't look at them. I don't look at people as a role. I have so much love and so much gratitude in my life that when I look back 3 years ago and think of this anal retentive, type A, intellectual, suit and tie, judgmental prick walking around on the planet serving nobody, my life is just so incredibly different. And I really, 8 reallys, I believe that psychedelics, be they ketamine or other things, are really powerful catalysts for people that really want that change. But it's not, to me, what I've learned is it's not about the experiences, you know? And I did that. I went from one experience to the next, and then it was like, oh, you know, when I found out that I had this sort of gift for energy work and I could literally connect energetically with other people, I mean, to the point where I have one person that I know that we would connect energetically, and sometimes he would send me a text and said, not right now, I got something going on. I mean, that level of connection, that's like, shit, that's some powerful, amazing stuff. But that's not what it's about for me anymore. You know, I've experienced that. I have that in my background. I have that in my arsenal. That's the foundation for my life. But my life is just about serving a bunch of nomads that live in cars and vans and whatnot, and helping people to heal and so on and so forth. And again, I do work with ketamine still very selectively, but I have a very different process based on my experience for how I do that.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I'll attest to that too, right? Like, I think for me, that's one of the big markers that I look for in myself and in others who are doing this work, is that if we really are changing or attempting to change internally, at some point there should be some external manifestation of that, right? Like, we should look a little differently, we should carry ourselves differently. Maybe it's different clothes, maybe it's a different lifestyle, maybe it's a complete different change like Gary's gone through. But you know, you carry yourself very differently than you did when I first met you, like very differently, and it feels very genuine and authentic, and real and tangible and permanent too. I can't imagine you going backwards.
Oh.
That doesn't even feel possible.
You can't go back.
Yeah.
And the people that I work with, and I don't work I don't do things in the psychedelic space. I do things in the awakening space. That's kind of my thing. And I have helped several people actually make that initial shift, both with ketamine. But the way that I approach that is very scientific, because, you know, I look at the fact that you're in this super open, super neuroplastic state. So I work with somebody in advance, and the difference in integration that I see with ketamine versus classic psychedelics is the integration comes first. And what I have people do is really set intent. So on the day that you're going to dose, I tell people, get up in the morning, and whatever you want to focus on healing in your life, if you want to deal with your anger issues, if you want to deal with this, whatever that is, you know, spend the entire day focused on what is the problem initially, but spend the day as, what would this look like if I could live differently than this? What would my life look like if I wasn't walking around pissed off and angry and popping off all the time? How would that look? How would that feel? And to really just spend time with that, because when we get you dosed up for that 20 or 30 minute time period, all that stuff that you've been working on, because that's the way I approached it. I worked on all this stuff, and then I dose and I just kick back and let it sink in, let it do its thing. And very different from plant medicines. Plant medicines have a different, you know, they have prana and personality. Ketamine is a chemical. It doesn't have either. But we know exactly how it works chemically and neurologically. And so I really want to take advantage of that. I curate individual playlists for each dose. I usually do 3 doses. I curate individual playlists based on sort of the energy and of the songs and whatnot. It's a thing. And but here's what I tell people also. Once you have your dose and you're in that superplastic state, and this is to me, I will not work with somebody that I don't believe is really ready to do this or wants to do this. For the next few days, because what happens is your mind kind of just goes wide open, and then it slowly starts closing again. So you're going to be open, really, really open for 3 or 4 days afterwards. And it's so important to monitor and curate what you input during those 3 days, because otherwise you'll start building those negative connections all over again. So what you watch on TV, the social media you consume, the music you listen to, the news you watch, everything in that following 3 days, I tell the folks I work with, needs to be very intentionally focused on building those new pathways, creating the life you want to live for yourself, and not just going back like I did. I'd go to ketamine clinic, I get my infusion, and I go home, and then I watch. I used to like, honestly, I worked 15 years in the prison system as a counselor, so I know a lot about law enforcement. I taught criminal justice at college. But I used to watch those, you know, I can't even remember what it's called now. Those shows where the guys go out in video cameras and they catch the cops being assholes. Yeah, I forget what it's called. There's a whole series of YouTube videos, you know, to show how, you know, cops are nasty and do this and that, and they violate people's rights. And I used to watch all that stuff and just consume all that hate and angst and just judgment. And I was coming home from ketamine clinic and I was going back and I was watching the same stuff. I was doing the same stuff I was doing in my life, and that's why it wasn't durable. That's why it didn't last. And so, you know, when I work with people, you know, I try to do a lot of the integration stuff first, and then really help them to recognize that openness and to really be intentional with how they curate any kind of input into their life for, you know, at least a week, you know, afterwards.
Beautiful, Gary.
I think you said something really important earlier is about, you know, epiphanies, you know, and it took me a long time to get to that place where I realized that sometimes epiphanies that you have they're not quite as good as the next one that's going to come. You know what I mean? So you got to kind of take your time coming through these super open-minded places to, you know, let that settle before you start making decisions. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the things I was hoping we could maybe circle back on, was that portion where you now in retrospect can see it as spiritual bypassing. But I would imagine in the moment and just knowing you and kind of being a little part of that journey, that it probably didn't feel like spiritual bypassing in the moment.
It felt very efficient.
Right.
It really did.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, if I can get this like right now, that's great. And you know, and you know, I still, you know, I mean, I still have challenges in life. I still, you know, the alcohol gone, most of my stuff gone. I still smoke cigarettes. I hate cigarettes. Cigarettes suck. I hate it for so many reasons, and I still smoke. You know, so yeah, I still have my stuff. But
How did you know, like, what was the moment, maybe there wasn't one single moment, but how did you come to the understanding that, in your words, some of what you did felt or feels to you now like it was spiritual bypassing? Like, how did you go from a place of like, oh no, I think this is great, and I'm like, you know, jumping from mountaintop to mountaintop and all this sort of thing, to like, maybe there is some value in climbing down the mountain and climbing back up the other side, and like in the actual like climb, the struggle of the climb to the mountaintop, there is some, you know, something of value in there, not just being at the mountaintop.
great question. I got a girlfriend. It wasn't intentional, but it was the second person that I had worked with, and I was very respectful of everything. But after this all happened, she just broke like wide open, and all this love came out. And she was love, and I was handy. And you know, the relationship didn't last very long, but it really was like blasting a mirror right in front of my face, where, you know, it really showed me that, you know, life isn't lived in some esoteric place. You know, life is lived, you know, like the Buddhists have this saying, you know, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. You know, you still gotta, and that was my question, how do I live like a human being when I don't feel like one anymore? When I have all this wisdom, I have all these mystical experiences behind me. And when I got involved with really down in the dirt of life, and I started getting involved with other people, not just as a mentor or as a whatever, but in a personal relationship with somebody, boy, that just brought up a mirror in front of my face that said, holy mackerel. You know, I have missed a lot of steps. I had a lot of wisdom about things, and a lot of knowledge about things. But I had no practical experience with any of that stuff. And when I got into that relationship, which lasted about a month. But because we had this, we still have this. She is one of the people that I have this sort of energy connection with. I mean, we could literally communicate with each other when she's not even in the same state. Sort of like that twin phenomenon, you know what I mean, that you hear about. But that was all cool and great. And you know what? We had a lot of painful work to realize that this was not a couple type relationship. She is more like, she is not a soulmate. She is not a twin flame. She's sort of like a soul sister in my sort of spirit family, sort of. And it took a lot of angst and pain to go through that and just to recognize how really inept I was at the day-to-day chopping wood and carrying water and just doing stuff, just being a guy, just being a regular guy walking around. And that is really the way I look at myself. I don't look at myself as some sort of spiritual whatever anymore. I mean, I am so grateful for those experiences, and I'm so grateful for the knowledge and the wisdom. And you know, I can't believe some stuff that comes out of my mouth sometimes when I'm talking to people. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that. But I'm just a guy, and part of this whole name change thing kind of relates along with that, because I wanted to really put some physicality into this change, and so I decided to change my name from Gary to Andy, and I didn't want a mystical name based on Sanskrit wisdom. You know, I didn't want any of that stuff. Andy is a plain old name, like Andy Griffith or something. It's just a plain old name. It's just average, everyday, because that's how I want to personify. That's how I want to manifest. It's just as Andy, regular guy, you know. And I have a lot of tools. I've been thinking Handy Andy. That's kind of cool. Maybe I'll go by Handy Andy out in the nomad community. But this is where, to me, this is where it's lived. It's lived from a place of grace and love, and you know, for other people and for myself. You know, because I hated myself with a passion, and I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful. So I want to kind of maybe get you guys involved a little bit and ask if anyone else has. Okay, David.
I wanted to ask, and you kind of covered it. Does your early life, does it ever come creeping back in, and you feel kind of depressed, or does that just not happen?
No. I mean, I still have the same emotions and experiences everybody else does, and I don't bypass them anymore. I used to. It was like, oh, you know, there's a lesson here, and I'm gonna just take this lesson without really. It's like I'm gonna go to this place of immediate forgiveness without even admitting that I was hurt. You know, to me that's bypassing. You know, and I learned that that's not the way it is. I'm a human being, and I have emotions. And when my girlfriend, that seems funny to think of her like that now, but when you know, I decided this wasn't going to work for us and whatever, I was having all kinds of jealousy and emotions and all this stuff that I was having to deal with. It was very real stuff, and it was very hard, very painful. So I still experience the same things, but I have a different perspective, and I'll share a quick story about my little wristband here. That I heard this little band. This is not a thing. It's a potty training watch, is what the person who told me to get it called it. I am potty trained. That is not a problem. Conquered that one. It's also called a medication timer. So this has 15 alarms per day that you can set. So I set this to vibrate on my wrist. I've had it a week. I love this thing. Best spiritual practice I've ever had. I set it to vibrate once an hour. And my intent that I set with this watch is every time it vibrates, that is my cue to just stop where I am, be fully present with where I am right now, and to remember that I get to start over anytime I want. Normally it's at the beginning of every day, but why not make it every hour? You know?
Share the story about the motorcycle.
So here's how that unfolds. And so this is a new technique for dealing with that old stuff. So I have a motorcycle. I had to come up here to Phoenix. I'm staying down in Tucson right now. I'm doing a project for somebody. I needed a new front tire. I had one delivered. Amazon dropped it off. Within 10 minutes, a porch pirate came and took it.
Oh, shit.
My brand new freaking tire. And this was like 2 days ago. And I needed the tire to get up here. So I was like, damn. So I had to buy a new tire. So I got on my motorcycle. I found one across, I'm staying in Tucson, across Tucson. And I'm driving my motorcycle and I'm driving down this street and I'm thinking, oh, son of a bitch, I can't believe people are like that. And I was pissed that somebody stole this tire. And I live on Social Security. I don't have a lot of money. You know, I was livid. And sure enough, about halfway to the tire store, it was about 20 minutes away, I felt my little wristband vibrate. And I just out of habit, because I've been doing it for a week now, all of a sudden, I just shifted perspective. I started with being aware of my of where I was. I'm on my motorcycle, running good, sun's shining, wind. I'm in there's trees and people, and I just really became present. And I stopped all of that. And then the next thing was, even though it only happened an hour ago, it's still in the past. And at this point, it's just a story.
Just a tire.
It's just a story from the past, even though it was fresh and only an hour ago. And so the first half of my motorcycle ride to get my new tire, really crappy, full of anger and crap. Second half, I enjoyed the ride. And I had a pleasant second half of my ride because I changed my perspective. And that's why I love this thing. This is awesome. This has been such a good tool for me to just remind myself all throughout the day, every hour. Stop what you're doing, stop ruminating, just be present. And these are the tools, the practical tools that I learned in all of this esoteric stuff to really learn how to walk through life as just a dude that has the same feelings and emotions and frustrations and foibles as everybody else does.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. I think it's kind of feels to me a little bit like an allegory for at least what I've experienced. I don't know if anyone else has with plant medicines, that it kind of, for me, it interrupts my thought process, my who I am and how I think about the world and what I'm ruminating on. It kind of puts a pause on that and gives an opportunity to take a deep breath, to think about things in a new way, to flip life on its side. What about if I look at it that way? And that's a really, this is a beautiful micro example of that, right? A way to bring, to integrate that. To
best
bring that
$20 I ever spent.
Yeah. Yeah, so someone over here. Yeah.
So I've talked to you a couple times. Last time I talked to you, you were heading to courtside, and then I wasn't real sure on what you said, if you made it there or not. Did you make it there?
I did. I spent the winter in courtside.
And then how was that being around that many people?
Oh, it was awesome. It was awesome. And here's this, talking about my whole life. So yeah, the drum circles and the full moon ceremonies and all the stuff to participate in, it was freaking awesome. And the people, and and I really feel that's my calling. That's why I'm here, is to serve that community. And there's, it's a beautiful community. But people end up out there as nomads, not because they saw a YouTube video and want to go chase the dream. A lot of people got there through suffering. They've had some nasty shit happen in their life and they end up living in their freaking car or van. And now they're trying to make the best of their life. And after a while, they come to embrace that life. But there's a lot of pain out there. And I am just really humbled and honored to be able to help people with that, to help hold that for people.
Abby?
How do you feel like ketamine has helped with your health and to get off of all of those medications?
The weight loss, the physical body changes, I can't explain. I don't even have a theory.
Can I toss one out?
Sure.
This is just my observations, but it seems like in Gary and Andy's case and in others, myself as well, and other people, that as we start to think differently about ourselves, not only who we are as a spiritual being, maybe out there in the stars and the ethers and the meta and all of that, also this physical body that we're in, I think we start to care for it differently. I think you started to care for it differently. I don't think it was intentional. It wasn't like, hey, I want to lose weight, so let me take some ketamine and shift my.
That's a
my
good point. Let me
reality.
jump in on that, because that is a good point, because it's really kind of funny and paradoxical, because when I used to think of myself as through an ego perspective as separate, I am just, this is me. I am the amalgamation of all my years of living and all my experiences, and this is me, and I have no connection with anything else. When I was coming from that perspective, I treated my body horribly. I ate horribly. I put stuff in my body. I never took care of my body. And as soon as I started to see my body as a vessel for my soul, all of a sudden, I really wanted to take care of it. And that doesn't make any sense, because I am not my body, And when I started realizing that, all of a sudden I became really motivated to take care of it a lot better. And I think another part of that question is just the shift in awareness, because I don't think of awakening and all this as being super metaphysical. I think it's just returning to the place where we started, and it's just becoming aware. And I started becoming aware of my body, and I would eat something and I could feel it inside my body, like, oh, no. My body says, top ramen, no. I'm doing all this work to digest it. I'm not getting anything back. No, don't do this anymore. So I think it was just a shift in awareness of my body, and by being more aware of my body, and then being more aware even of other people, that has changed my relationship with my body and with other people, because I am more deeply aware. When I see Troy, I don't just see, your role. I see
Sexy
you.
6'4". That's where you're going.
That's not where I was going with that, but I see you from your soul, from your essence. I see who you are as a person, and I see that in every person in the room. If I look around, I see people here, not just for the role you play or whatever. It's just a change in perspective, and the ketamine really helped me to open my mind and get rid of those biases that I had. And I still use it today, but I use it differently, because I can get really open. When I have a lot of stuff to process, I find that it really can be helpful. And in some of the energy work that I do can be really intense. And just, being able to, I look at it as like I grew up in a cabin, in the woods, and I'm visiting my childhood cabin. I'm just kind of like chilling in the place that just feels really comfortable, no distractions for a couple hours. And I have learned to take the 20-minute or 20 to 40-minute trip and turn it into about 3 to 4 hours. I can stay even when the ketamine drops off, and I know it does, because the come down of ketamine is typically pretty fast. It's like, oh, I guess it's over now. It's like really fast, at least for me. But I can stay, now that I am in that open and awareness place, I can stay in that same sort of state for 3 or 4 hours. And I can even take a break and go get something to eat and come back and go right back again. And that was how I started integrating, I will say, is I started with that thought is, how can I stretch this experience out longer and longer, even after it's over? And can I stretch it for an hour? Can I stretch it for 3 hours? Can I stretch it for another day? Can I get up in the morning and still be in this awareness state? And I really was very focused on curating that extension of, I needed that boost to kind of get there, and then it's like, okay, let's hang on to this. And it got to the point where, I could be there, I could go to these places and have these experiences without anything, because I learned how to be there through that chemical, if that makes sense.
I'll just add to that, ketamine in particular, I think most psychedelics probably do this to some degree, but I think ketamine does it quite a bit more direct and cleanly, and maybe even to a greater degree, in terms of the, as was mentioned, the dissociative effect, like truly dissociating from your body, meaning that, like, I don't know if everyone here has done ketamine, often it feels like you won't feel, like right now I can feel my feet and my toes, right? Even though I'm not necessarily, that's not my toes not chopped off, it's not bleeding, it's not like the forefront of my thought, I still can feel it, I have feet on the ground, right? Even though I don't have to look at them, I just know that they're there, they're present. On ketamine, not so much, right? Like that sensation kind of disappears depending on how much you take and whatever else. But I think that having that separation from the body gives us an opportunity to look differently at our bodies, right? Like very often I think right now we feel like, as you mentioned, like me, Troy, and this physical body that I'm in are like one and the same, right? Like I wouldn't even know how to separate them currently. It feels like I am me, I am this meat suit, and I stop right here, and you start right there, and it's very hyper apparent, it's very present to us, right? And when we can take these opportunities to be in a different state, even for a short period of time, I really think it gives us a unique opportunity to shift that relationship. It's not mechanical and like, okay, if you do that, it's guaranteed to happen, but it's much easier because we don't, that like the interwovenness of it, of us and our physicalness, gets become separate, and it becomes very easy to, oh, okay, no, these actually are two different things. You don't have to think about it intertwined. I am not, we very so often say, I am tired. Well, I'm just experiencing tiredness right now. Tired is not all of me. It's not, it's not the entirety of my being, right? I'm just, I'm temporarily tired, or I'm temporarily sad, or, whatever it is kind of thing. And I think that, for me, has been really helpful. So I think that's just an important thing to highlight. And
I think that is a real differentiator for ketamine over classic psychedelics, because that's what it is. It is a dissociative anesthetic. It is supposed to separate your mind from your body. And that's why the military uses it in battlefield, because it doesn't affect the autonomic nervous system. It doesn't affect pulse, respiration, blood pressure. So a soldier can get his leg blown off and they can pump him full of ketamine. It'll separate his mind from his body without affecting the other stuff, so that it's safe. It's safer to use. But that is the point. It separates the mind from the body. And that is the principle that as I understood that helped me to be able to work with it, to say, okay, now, if I'm going to be separated here, if I'm going to have a blank slate, what the hell am I going to do with this blank slate once it's there?
Very true. And just so everyone else knows, maybe this is helpful. Some people have, especially with ketamine being a legal one, not only is it legal, but it's extremely safe, right? I mean, dosage dependent, of course. The dosage makes medicine or poison in all cases, but you could go into any emergency room across the country and you will find they have ketamine in there. It's used very extensively, very widely. It's very common as an anesthetic, so I don't know if everyone knows. That's another thing about these things, like, oh, they're way on the fringe of society. Like, nope, not ketamine. That's actually very interwoven into even our Western medical models. So, yeah.
I just want to push back a little bit and maybe change your perspective. You said you're not your body, and I get that. But have you read any Martin Ball stuff? Any of his work?
Yeah.
he talks a lot about non-duality, and you mentioned that earlier. Like, I think it's important that we recognize that, at least for now, this is what all we are. And so until that changes, we need to respect what we're given to work with. This is a tool, you know, and it's, even though we're just experiencing not being in our body with ketamine, right? But like, we're still our body, like, all the time. So
Yeah, I think the difference is just that, like, understanding that we are more than that, right? Like, that it doesn't, however we feel in our body doesn't have to be the totality of our experience, right? That we can transcend that, we can go beyond that, we are beyond that, right? Because I think sometimes it can take such a hyper focus. And look, I understand it. When we're not feeling healthy in our bodies, it's challenging to think about other things or to live life or to, you know, X, Y, Z, fill in the blank, whatever. But you know, these experiences can help us kind of see beyond sometimes that real seemingly like really loud, bright distraction or whatever it is.
And for me, it was, you know, I have a strong psychology background, and, you know, I understand the pathology for early childhood trauma and blah, 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 blah. Excuse me. Damn cigarettes. But through the ketamine particularly, I had an opportunity to let go of that story. And today, I can tell you, I am not an incest survivor. I am not a trauma survivor. I am not a recovering alcoholic. Those things don't define me. I don't have to live with that baggage every day. And this transition, I mean, I worked on, you know, just think about having parents that think of you as a sex toy, you know? I mean, that's some screwed up shit, excuse me, but it is. And you know what? I went from years and years and years of therapy trying to forgive and let it go and recognize it was not about me. All of a sudden, within a matter of a week or two, that forgiveness turned into compassion. And then shortly thereafter, that compassion turned into love. And when I was down in Pierce, and this is a pretty intimate story, but when I was down in Pierce, I resisted at first, but I did. I actually sat at my computer and I channeled a message from my parents to my sister. A healing message from my parents. I connected with my parents. And I just dictated that, I just transcribed this thing. I don't have any negative feelings about my parents or about the kids who abused me or anything else. I have a tremendous depth of compassion and love for them because they suffered in their lives. And I never knew that, but I feel that now. And that's why I look at people in the world, people on the news that are bad, evil, whatever. I don't like a lot of things that people do sometimes, but I don't see any difference between me and my father, or me and anybody else who's out there raping and pillaging or whatever. There's no difference. There's just a difference in degree of suffering. And people that were hurt tend to be hurters. And I get that. And I think the hardest step in this journey for me was turning that inward. Because it was really easy, actually, once I got it, it was easy to forgive my parents and forgive everybody else and love everybody. It was really hard for me to turn that to myself because of that feeling that if I forgive myself for the trauma that I have caused other people, I'm letting myself off the hook. And the way to prove that I'm really remorseful is to continue to suffer with that shame forever, because to say, I'm going to let go of it, just like I let go of everything else, that was a hard lesson for me, because it just felt like I was letting myself off the hook, and I need to be accountable for the rest of my life for the damage that I've done to other people. I was an alcoholic for years and years and years. I wasn't violent, I didn't cheat on my wives, but I was unavailable and I was kind of a dick. And people who get drunk all the time are that way. And for me to let go of that and totally love myself and to say, that's gone. That is, you know, it's not about staying in chains because of causing harm. It's about transitioning into a person who doesn't cause it anymore. And that's where I live, is right now. 1 hour at a time.
Beautiful. I think it's a beautiful place to wrap up. Does anyone have any more remaining questions or anything they wanted to? Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if you could just say a little bit about suggested or recommended dosing, either how often or how much for like or the K-hole, like for opening spiritually as a person.
Sure, the question was about dosing, and there is and this is not my opinion, this is research studies. Just go home and look it up on Google, and this is what you're going to find. The dosing is based on milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So generally, that's around 1 to 1, about 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight. So when I work with people, I usually start at 0.7 for the first dose. I usually bump that up to 1.5 for the second dose, because depending on how things went the first time.
So a couple of caveats there just to connect the points. He's talking about insufflation or intranasally, right? It's way different if you're taking it intramuscularly or intravenously
Okay.
method. And also, when he
I'll
says
address that.
0.7 or 1.5, 0.7 would be 700 milligrams or 0.7 of a gram, right? So other one would be 1%.
0.7 milligram, not of a gram. It's the therapeutic dose, if you look at the studies, is right around 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight.
So you're doing about 70 milligrams would be the 0.7, about 70
Right,
milligrams.
so it would
150
be
milligrams.
0.7 of a milligram is where I would start, and then the effective doses can go all the way up to like a 1.5 in a clinic, 1.5 milligrams per kilogram body weight. But the method of delivery is different. So if you're doing it, I'll get you in a minute. If you're getting IV, then the bioavailability, which is how much actually gets into your brain, is almost 100%. IM, it's about 96, 97%. Nasally, it's about 50%. So I have to double the amount, because the bioavailability taking it intranasally is only about 50%, and orally it's a waste of money, because you're down to like 12 to 14, 15% bioavailability if you take it, if you like Mind Bloom and these places that send you the lozenges and whatnot. Ineffective, and unless you can get to the K-hole, that's the other thing with ketamine, and there is I do believe in a placebo effect. It is very powerful, but there is no microdosing with ketamine. Study after study after study shows that in order for it to have that effect, you have to have that dissociative experience, and you're not going to get that with the microdose. That may be true for mushrooms or LSD or other things, but not with ketamine. Ketamine is not like the others. You have to be in that dissociative K-hole, quote unquote, state in order to have that neuroplasticity work. It doesn't work any other way. So the dosing is really, really critical that you get right into that spot. And the only difference between one person or client and another would be the bioavailability. So if somebody's got crappy nasal passages, then that it may take a little more or whatever, and I can usually tell, you know, that's why I start low with a 0.7 milligram per kg body weight for the first dose, and then I usually go to 1.5, and then I'll go back to 1 for the third, and that's usually the way that I work it. But you had a...
You said something earlier about the now. When you were going through your troubles, was the past and the present and the future like three separate things? Because a lot of people, when they go through the trouble like you have, I have, and probably a lot of people here, is in the beginning of the process, I started looking too much at the past with all the what ifs and whatever. And then I got to a point where it was like, okay, I'm gonna move away from the past, but now I got all this future scary stuff, and it's like, okay, what if, and maybe this. And now I realize, I just came there from Connecticut 3 months ago, and this is New Mexico. I told some people here, I had a smile on my face because I'm now, always.
Yeah.
The past is there, and the present is there, and my now is always gonna be between them as a moving target. And when I wake up in the morning, I don't know what I'm gonna be because it's still now. And at the end of the day, I look back at all my nows and go, I have a whole bunch left, and I don't wanna keep wasting them. I'm looking forward and backward and stuff. So, did that make a difference?
Sure, and the way you described it is exactly the way I experienced it. The first thing, the easiest thing for me, because yes, I live now. To me, and yes, I'm kind of a mystic. So to me, you know, the past and the future are all exist currently in the present. But with all that being set aside, it was easier to let go of the past than it was the fear of the future. Because what I recognized was that human beings are the only species on the planet that suffers from things that are not directly in front of them.
Might happen.
Yep.
You know, and we, you know, animals, you know, get injured and get horny or get hungry or have needs, and they address what is right in front of them. Animals do not think, oh gosh, when I was, you know, 3 years ago, the other animals didn't like me. You know, we're the only ones that do that. The only way that the past really, you know, regardless of pathology, the only reason why the past affects us now is because it's a story in our head, and we just hang on to it. So it was easy to let go of that. It was a little harder letting go of the future, and then eventually I matured to the point where, you know.
Well, the difference is in the past it can't be changed except the stories change. All of a sudden, what you remember may or may not ever happen.
Right.
And what you don't see in the future isn't going to happen unless you see it. And that vision is a moving target. But like you always say, if you dream and see what you want and stay focused on that, that's what you get. And for me, I don't even want to know what that is because I'm not there yet. So I'll just wake up and just go, okay. But a lot of people will stay focused, and I stayed focused for a long time, and then it was like, well, actually, I was just saying, my dad died in 2022, and it was like somebody pulled my ankle out. And it's like I didn't have to think about that anymore. So now I don't worry. The futures, I mean, yeah, you can make plans, and plans change. You can have like a flat tire, and it's like, well, now what I do? Or like, hypotheticals. What would you do with $1 million? $1 million, I'll show you. You know, don't ask me things I don't know. People ask me, what do you got? I don't know yet. I'm not there.
Thanks.
Beautiful. Anyone else? Closing comments, remarks, anything? Anything else you want to share as we wrap up?
No, but thank you guys for holding space for me to share my story with you.
Yeah, thank you for being so patient.
Yeah, I applaud you for coming and sharing. I mean, it's a vulnerable personal thing, and also giving us the opportunity to reflect and to hear your story and to be a part of it. So appreciate you being here, and appreciate all you guys coming and you know, listening, and hopefully you have something you can take away. And I think particularly for me, one thing that I really kind of maybe want to bring Gary up here and share was that concept of like spiritual bypassing and just always kind of like keeping ourselves in check a little bit. Sometimes we might have these big powerful realizations and they might feel so profound in the moment, and our ego loves that, right? It loves to, I finally have become God, wonderful, right? Or whatever else it is, and just a word of caution around that, right? That what might feel so palpable and burning bright one day might be a little different with a little bit of life and experience and history down the road when we look back at that. So I think if we can stay in that mindset, we can hopefully avoid some of those pitfalls perhaps. But it's all a journey, right? So yeah.
I got one last question on this. I've heard ketamine being addictive multiple times. If you're, and I don't completely understand addictions, but what's the addiction process?
Sure. The question was whether ketamine is addictive or how that looks or whatever. Pretty universally, most people who work with ketamine or have studied it say that the addiction potential for ketamine is extremely, extremely low. It does not have any, and part of the reason for that is because it doesn't have any real physiological implications other than separating your mind from the body. The only real addiction might be maybe wanting to overuse for like what I did. There was a time when I was just learning so much. I was just bypassing. I was just like, I want to learn the next big thing. I want to get the next insight, and that was the draw that made me use it more than I should, and I had to correct that. But there is no physiological addiction like alcohol or cocaine or heroin or something like that. It's not. And most of the research studies will show you just that. And I really tried that on when I first started with ketamine. Would I go way out of my way, in order to get more so I could have another dose right now? Oh, hell no. There's just none of that. That's not what it's like.
Yeah, there's a big difference between physical addiction and psychological addiction.
Right.
Which you can be psychologically addicted to just about anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Fair question. Okay, wonderful. I think that's complete. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.